Hello, my name is Jeff Livingston. I'm the historian with the Hawaiian Railway Society. I hope you're enjoying these small segments that we've been doing about the railroad and the rail operations on Oahu particularly. And what we're going to talk about today is kind of a follow-on to a slightly earlier program about the passenger service provided by the OR&L. In that segment, we went over the kinds of cars, types of cars, where they were built, how they were operated somewhat, and what they looked like. Passenger traffic on the OR&L was secondary to freight traffic. Railroads then, just like they are today, make the bulk of their money hauling freight. Benjamin Dillingham ran excursions, tremendous numbers, to provide revenue while the freight business was developing. And we have to keep in mind that the name of the company was Oahu Railway and Land Company. So there were huge investments not only in the railroad but also in the land. And the railroad is what connected all of those segments of the land together. So the ranching, plantations, all provided freight for the railroad. But excursions were never forgotten. I'm sure quite a number of you are familiar with the Haleiwa Hotel. That was an OR&L venture, and excursions were run from Honolulu to the Haleiwa Hotel for daily trips and sometimes for weekend trips. But by 1927, May of that year, the OR&L was running regularly scheduled steam-drawn passenger trains from Honolulu to Kahuku, Honolulu to Evan Mill, and Honolulu to Schofield Barracks. Now, automobiles had already taken the toll on the passenger traffic of the OR&L. And during those early days, there was no regulation involved as far as taxis. So if you had a car, your own private vehicle, you could hire yourself out without any licensing requirements, without any regulatory requirements to be concerned about as a taxi, and haul people from point A to point B for whatever charge you and the passenger could agree on. The OR&L saw this and realized that passenger service, especially steam hauled, which is far more expensive than an automobile, was going to just continue to degrade and provide less and less revenue. Now, the OR&L was actually a very progressive railroad, and as early as 1909, Dillingham investigated the use of rail cars. These were self-propelled, self-contained passenger cars, sometimes with trailers, sometimes without, as an alternative to the steam-drawn trains. He looked at both McKean motor cars and Hall Scott motor cars, both of which were successful on the mainland. A McKean motor car was chosen for a potential purchase for the OR&L, and the newspaper at the time reported it in fact had been purchased and was due to arrive in Honolulu to replace the steam engine. This never came about. The first actual rail car that was purchased was not even purchased for the OR&L. It was purchased for the Hilo Railroad. Again, that was a Dillingham concern. And it was a Hall Scott motor car which served the Hilo Railroad for a number of years. And they also purchased a smaller Fairbanks Morse motor car. But back to the OR&L. In May, they were running steam. In June, they started construction of 2 motor coaches. These were purpose-built in the OR&L shop, just like the passenger cars had been. And they used Railway Motor Corporation drive equipment. These were gasoline-powered 6-cylinder engines with a mechanical drive to the trucks that the motor cars sat on. It was quite an engineering feat, and it was all controlled pneumatically. And that was probably the most difficult thing to control because you had an engine on both ends of the car. They were connected by air, and to get the two of them coordinated took a great deal of finesse. The first car built, M1, looks very similar to an interurban car of that era. Large front windows where the engineer or driver would be seated. It's a large car, held around 50 people. And this car was placed in service between Honolulu and Kahuku. It was shortly followed by M2, a slightly different design. And you can see here that instead of having a smooth front end, it had a platform on both ends. It also contained a baggage compartment. And it too provided service between Honolulu and Kahuku. Now notice in this photograph there are 3 cars behind M2. The cars were powerful enough to haul trailers to increase the passenger capacity if demand was there. Eventually, because the friction bearings in the original passenger cars and those built by the OR&L created more drag than a roller bearing, Timken roller bearings were installed in place of the babbited friction bearings on a few cars to be used specifically as trailers. I should have pointed out in both those pictures, these cars, M1 and M2, were not the standard Pullman green of the OR&L passenger cars, which had been that way since day one. These cars were painted silver with a blue stripe. The cars that were acting as trailers were painted to match. One of the cars equipped with Timken roller bearings was combination 36, and you can see the paint difference here, the silver and the blue. With the Timken roller bearings, the cars could move more easily and put less strain on the M1 or M2 power cars. There was a second car converted to Timken roller bearings. This is number 38. Also a combination coach. Now, it would make sense for these to run with M1, which didn't have a baggage compartment, but would have also increased the baggage carrying capability of M2. There were at least 2 straight passenger coaches that were also converted with Timken roller bearings, but I'm not sure if they were actually repainted. The motor cars were determined to be a success, and the OR&L decided to convert 2 passenger cars to motor cars. These were to be M3 and M4. The cars they converted were the second-class coaches, which could be seen in our previous presentation on passenger cars. They are identical to Coach 57 at the OR&L, except they were equipped with 1 RMC power unit, so 1 gasoline engine, 1 power truck. And they did not change in appearance significantly from the standard passenger car. These 2 cars also provided excellent service for some period of time. And one of the interesting things about M1 and M2, they also provided school service between Ewa and downtown, or actually Waipahu. They would go out as far as Eva and lay over overnight, and then they would leave in the morning, pick up school kids in Eva, Waipahu along the way, deliver them downtown to the OR&L station, and the HRT, Honolulu Rapid Transit, would then pick them up and deliver them to the various schools. And the same thing happened in reverse in the afternoon. It was a very, very good system, and it worked very well for quite a long time. So with all of the steam-drawn passenger service, except for special occasions, if there was a boxing match at Schofield, they would run a steam train because they had enough people on board to make it viable. If there were a football game in Kahuku, they'd run a steam train for that special event because, again, there were sufficient people that it was somewhat profitable at the very least. So what happened to all of these other cars? There were almost 60 passenger cars at one point on the OR&L. What the OR&L did was convert them to can cars. They didn't scrap them. This is a former first-class coach. You notice that the clear story, there's no little vent windows up there anymore. They're all gone away. And there's been a freight door placed midway on the side of the car. A large number of these cars were converted this way and remained that way in can service. Now, it was called a can car because it would pick cans up formed by the American Can Company and deliver them to the canneries. Sheet metal would arrive via ship, be brought to American Can Company by the OR&L. The cans would be fabricated, and they'd be loaded on OR&L can cars like this one and taken to the canneries. All of that changed with the attack on Pearl Harbor. As you can imagine, more freight was going to be moved, more passengers were going to be hauled, and these can cars were immediately placed back in service as passenger equipment, and steam haul trains returned to the OR&L. Now, they rarely went further than Pearl Harbor, though. To get the workforce to and from Pearl Harbor, the OR&L pressed all of these old cars into service. Now, they had to be returned to passenger service, so seats had to be reinstalled, windows that had been locked shut had to be able to be opened. The ventilators in the clear story were not reinstalled. They're known as lights. And some of the cars had no seats at all, so benches were installed for passengers to ride in. Not the most comfortable, but then the trip was relatively short. There were still a few fully equipped cars with all their seats and nice cushiony sprung seats, but they were becoming rather long in the tooth, so even at that, the ride to and from was not all that comfortable. The trip was long enough, though, based on a conversation I had with an old gentleman who was my landlord when I arrived here in Hawaii in 1990. I was already studying the OR&L. He worked at the shipyard as a ship fitter, and he said that the train trip was uncomfortable, but there was sufficient time to shoot craps and lose your paycheck between Pearl Harbor and Honolulu. This was obviously frowned upon by the authorities, and he did indicate that there were numerous busts made during these transits. No passenger cars were delivered to Hawaii after the war began, although a number of freight cars were. The Army, the Navy, and the OR&L were all very short on equipment. The Navy did receive some passenger cars. I believe there were a total of 5. And they were for use at Pearl Harbor, lettered up nicely, Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard. But they were found to be in such bad condition that standing on the platforms was prohibited, because they were fearful that if too many people got on it, they would fall off. The cars were used only briefly, and then only within Pearl Harbor, and they very soon parked. They were eventually taken out to a siding at Honolulu, where they were burned sometime around 1949, 1950. With the end of passenger service and the end of the railroad, the OR&L abandoned their main line on the 31st of December 1947. It became a terminal railroad, and there was no use for passenger equipment any further. The remaining passenger cars, a couple of them were used for a model railroad club. A couple of others were donated to the what is now a travel town in Los Angeles. Number 64, the parlor car, Dillingham's personal parlor car, and Coach 2 were refurbished somewhat and used in a display later in their lives at Ala Moana when the first phase was built. Later transferred when the second phase was built down to the Navy or the Army Piers, and then later to Bishop Museum. They finally made their way to the Hawaiian Railway Society. So to the best of anyone's knowledge, currently there is one second-class commuter coach, number 57, remaining in existence at the railroad, HRS. There are 2 first-class coaches, number 1 and number 2. Number 1 is at the travel town, Griffin Park in Los Angeles. Number 2 is at HRS, but has been reduced to only the trucks. Its condition became so bad that it had to be knocked down because it was a hazard. All of the metal parts have been saved. Everything has been documented. Drawings have been prepared. And once Coach 57 is returned to full operation and placed in service, HRS would like to begin the restoration of Coach 2. The 4th car is combination car 36, also at Travel Town, and then the elusive number 40, the only one not on, or the only one on Maui that is used as a private residence or cabin or getaway. In my previous, I made a plea, if you know who owns it in Maui, tell them we would love to have it back. It was actually, 40 was sold to the Honolulu Railroad and used by them for a number of years. It then became annexed to a restaurant. It became a bar car. And HRS was given the car by who we thought was the owner, only to find out when one of the members went over there, and this was years and years ago, that the guy that gave us the car didn't actually own it. So that deal was for naught, and the car stayed there in Maui. So that is the one and only car of its type ever built. 57 is one of a number, 1 and 2 are one of a number. But 57 is a sole survivor, 40 is a sole survivor, 1 and 2 are equal, and Kame 36 is a sole survivor. I encourage you to come out to the railroad, see what we're all about. Give us a hand if you like. We can always use volunteers. We'll find something for you to do that fits your skill set. Doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. If you like woodworking, we've got some small projects we could definitely use some help on. Those of us who are out there consistently and involved in larger projects oftentimes get so caught up in those larger projects that we never get to some of the little ones that would make such a huge difference. Trim work, wooden trim work inside of a locomotive cab, repairing a window frame for one of the locomotives. All of these things are low impact as far as work, high impact as far as restoration. So if you can, come out. If not, just come out for the train ride. See what we do, see what we're about. I can use carpenters, welders, pipe fitters, ship fitters, tinsmiths, sheet metal workers. Any one of these trades, any one of these, if you have an interest in, we can find something very productive and significant for you to accomplish should you so desire. Unfortunately, that's as far as I can go.